Welcome back to Celtic State of Mind Tuesday afternoon bulletin. Different makeup this week. I'm joined by Paul John, Brian, gents. This is my regular slot, so I suppose it should be me saying welcome to both of you. I've had two late call outs. Patrick will be joining you tomorrow, so don't worry. If you are missing him, you'll get your fix of him tomorrow. Gents, how are we doing? It's still deep, dark World Cup just now. We're nearly out the group stages. The end is in sight. We're coming to the end of November. Celtic will be returning, I think, in less than 3 weeks' time now, which I think we're all excited about. But how are you both holding up just now?
I'm all right. I mean, I'm glad you said it's different makeup because obviously in the studio sometimes you do need to be made up. I don't know about you, Brian. The lighting's no great in this studio, but thanks for that. Anyway, a couple of late call-offs for you, Declan. You'll be feeling like Stevie Clark, mate.
Yeah, aye, absolutely. Although I think Natasha and Lawrence are worried me a wee bit more than maybe a Stevie O'Donnell or whoever else maybe would put a Scotland side. So nothing to worry about there. I think able substitutes, so we should be cool for today. Our tagline there is Ange about to get bold with departures in January transfer window. We want to talk about that because it's going to be fast paced. We usually have that winter break in January when we can let the rumours roll, but we'll be here. It'll be game by game because we've got some catching up to do due to the World Cup. So I think rumour mill time is just now. Celtic have already completed a signing, a shocker out the blue. I think even though we knew it was near enough going to happen, and it looks like we're going to complete a double signing. So we also want to talk about Celtic's scouting and maybe still looking at leagues that's potentially in our favour to be shopping in. But Paul, I want to start in Bellsill Saturday. I know you gave it a plug yesterday when you were on with Liam. Both you and I were fortunate enough to attend the event. A massive shout out to Eddie Linus, who I know has been in a Celtic State of Mind along with Frank. If you don't listen to that, check it out. I was invited along with Eddie. That's still falling there. Invited along with Eddie on Saturday to the statue unveiling, and as always, good to see a lot of familiar faces, Celtic legends. And it was a special day, Paul. And I think we'd said before in here about statues to Celtic legends, and no bigger a legend than Billy McNeil. And something I was talking to John McKenna about, who did the statue. There's very little people in the UK who have actually got two statues. Jimmy Johnson's one of them. If anybody else is on the Google, just to let us know who else has got two statues. But there's a wee interesting fact to throw in.
I think it just shows you the impact that both men had, and it's not just on Celtic. You've just got to think of European football. That obviously there are certain areas of the British mainstream press who would overlook that. I just I've got this massive archive of stuff at home, and I was going through these old magazines, and it's the types of World Soccer and 442, and whenever they do the big polls, Declan, they always overlook our greats. They seem to always overlook the iconic Celtic players that done so well. Dalglish is always in these lists, top 100 players of all time, etc., etc., because he done it in England. But Big Billy, Jimmy Johnson, no surprise that there's two statues for each of the men. And the key for me, and I was at the the Bobby Lennox one as well, back in I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago now.
2018, November
2018.
2018, around about the same time of year, aye.
Yeah, and it was the same sculpture, I believe, and he's unbelievable. I mean, this is always a big worry. I said this yesterday, Brian. You're just thinking back to the Ronaldo statue, right? And you're waiting for that, the unveiling of it, and then you see this unbelievable monument standing there. And I saw it from a really good angle. I was just standing, I think, behind you to the right, and just Big Billy was standing there. It was incredible. So anybody in the area, anybody who visits Bellshill, driving through it, go and have a look at it. It's stunning.
Yeah, it's an absolute belter. Right away, I was standing beside John Clark when it came off, and I thought, who maybe better to know Billy playing with him than John? And right away, I says to him, I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Absolute cracker." So his former teammates were impressed by it, and yeah, I think a Ronaldo statue is something that probably still maybe haunts people when they're getting a statue.
Where is that, by the way? Is that
I
actually
think it's in
in
Madeira.
Madeira?
It's
Oh,
in
right.
Madeira, I think. If it's still there, that is, and it's maybe not been taken down for scrap metal or whatever, because it's not a likeness at all to Cristiano. But Brian, even though maybe not at the event and whatnot, I'm sure you saw coverage on it and photographs and whatever else. It's just always nice to see old familiar faces that Billy both played with and managed. Pat Bonner and Frank McAvenny were there, Mark Reed too, and Graham Sinclair. It's just always nice to see these kind of things, because so many times, like your own family, whatever, maybe the only time you see them is in sad occasions. So it's always good when it's a joyous occasion, when everybody's brought together.
Yeah, and do you know what's incredible about it? I've been kind of thinking about this the past few days. Like, I don't think anyone can quite appreciate how monumental a statue, someone building a statue of you is. I mean, it's there forever. I mean, it's, for Billy McNeill, he's in the hearts of Celtic fans forever. He's obviously written his name into club history, but to actually have a statue is just really quite incredible. Like, for his family, for his grandkids, great grandkids, whoever, it's just an amazing thing. And I think it speaks to not only the reverence he's held in terms of what he done as captain of Celtic, but it's the type of person he was as well. And the same way Jinky. And it's like, it's part of what makes Celtic such a. I'm always, telling people this down south when I'm chatting to them about Celtic, and I'm so proud to talk about it, because the makeup of Celtic and how we kind of came to be and what we stand for as a club and stuff, and our most legendary team and our most legendary figures are all great human beings as well, that are appreciated by families, and people can say, oh, this is Big Billy, this is what he did, this type of guy he was. And that's incredible. It's not just their footballing capability, it's what they presented as a whole. And there's no many clubs in the world that have players, statues everywhere that have that sort of special sort of significance. And I just think it's just such an incredible thing, and it really sets Celtic apart. And Jim and I were having a rant over the past few weeks about the sort of the money side of football and how it sort of takes the football away from people almost. Mm-hmm. It's just like Celtic, what we have, it's so much more than that. It's not about money, it's not about this and success. It's no Man City where there's sheets owning it and sending players and £500 a week. It's Celtic Football Club, and wherever you go in the world you can meet somebody. It's incredible, and it just sort of, it was emblematic of everything I love about Celtic. That's in a way. And I just think it really comes up why the club's so special and so different from everyone else.
Yeah, but that's been something in Alistair Johnson's comments we'll get on to. Came across Victor Wanyama playing in the same team, and his compliments from Victor, who was obviously at Celtic for not too long a time, but under Neil Lennon, it couldn't be any more compliment to the club. I think Alistair Johnson says that he's the best agent that Celtic could get, so that, speaks volumes to that. Someone who probably knew very little about the club, growing up in Kenya, then coming to European football when he was in Belgium before making the trip to Scotland. So
you tell me he didn't play Subbuteo and he never picked the green and white hoops, Declan? And no.
I think maybe a Liverpool or Man United man, Big Victor, maybe growing up, but I'm sure he's got it in his heart right now. But I think, Paul, what Brian was saying there, that it's important in terms of the community as well, and that was something that's on one of the plaques beside the statue. What Billy McNeill signifies, not just as a football player, but in terms of community, what Bells Hill is. A lot of Lithuanian people went into Bells Hill during migration times in Scotland, and it's important to remember that, and that links to the very foundations of Celtic Football Club itself.
Totally. I mean, we were there, Declan, separately, but we were there to film the event, and we got a chance to speak to yourself, Eddie, who has obviously worked tirelessly with his committee to get the thing done, and a few ex-players who played, I was going to say under Billy, but Tommy Boyd never actually played under Billy McNeill, but Billy did try to sign him from Motherwell, by the way, before he went to Chelsea. But we got a couple of ex-players in as well, and we're just chatting away, and that was what the discussion I had with Eddie. I says to him, when I mentioned the statue in Fife, which is Jim Baxter at Hillabeath, and you drive into Hillabeath, and not being disparaging to the area, but it's not got a great deal going for it, guys. It's just one of these working class areas, and you drive in, and there's this statue of Jim Baxter. If anybody's not seen it, it's stunning, and it's basically like he's in a pose that's quite nonchalant, because he was a silky player, looking down on everybody that actually enters that wee village in Fife. And there's going to be kids growing up who, the outlook can be quite bleak in these places, and then they might ask their dad or their granddad, who is this fella? And then they'll learn that actually, if you are dedicated enough in your sport, in politics, whatever it could be, because I've seen boxers, I've seen politicians with statues, I've seen musicians with them, then it is doable, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of your background, where you're from. And I think that when you see them in the hometowns, that's quite special. I love the statues up at Celtic Park, don't get me wrong. But I think when it's in a wee village or a wee area that, there's maybe not a great deal going for it, it's like a shining beacon of ambition and success and achievement. And I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes more significance. Sorry, Brian.
That ties into, Kev Green and I, we all say, well, the romantics axon. And it's, I was telling my missus, although she's Irish, but she doesn't know anything about football, she's not interested, but I was talking about Celtic recently. I was talking about the story, particularly the Lisbon, how we're from, but then the Lisbon Lions and how incredible achievement that is. And she said, why has that never been a movie? And I says, I know it's Hollywood stuff. And it goes to what you're saying, it's inspiring to everybody, because it's a group of guys from Glasgow, working class boys, done well, and literally won the greatest prize in football, probably, especially at club level. Mm-hmm. And they've done it in a way that will never be replicated, ever. And you're talking about not being represented in the media. That's never spoken about enough. Is that was all guys for the surrounding areas. Do you know what I mean? And there'll never, ever be a team of all Spaniards at Barcelona or all English at whatever club that win it. And it's so incredible. And it ties back into what we're saying. And it's just so important. It always excites me talking about it. I mean, I know everybody that's watching this knows, but it's just such a good feeling to talk about these things, I think. Not just
it is. It's totally. And by the way, you've reminded me, Brian, of one of the best things I remember reading, and it was like 10 years ago, and it's never ever come to fruition, but there was chat around Daniel Day-Lewis considering a major role in a film about Celtic, and the film was going to be called Paradise, and I think it was written by Peter Mullen, and I just remember it was in the mainstream press at the time talking about that film. So you're right, it's cinematic, it's got the proper Hollywood feel about it, and it has been considered. But as you know, because I know you're into film, Brian, these things might come back. They might come back to roost. Who knows? I hope it does.
You never know. You never know. Just like our charity single, Paul, a song that went disappearing through the years. So you never know who might pick up on it. There's plenty of talented people out there in the Celtic world that might just do that. But I think there's a lot in terms of identity, community and culture, and what you both say. And there's a few people coming in the comments here. Danielle's coming in to say, still think we need a statue of Fergus. What he done for our club should never be forgotten. I know from some chats that he's had with people that I don't think he's too fond of the idea of a statue. I don't think he's too keen on it. But even again, Paul, if you think of Fergus McCann, from Croy, I think it would take so much more significance for him to have one probably there. I know that the great Jimmy Quinn also came from Croy, but to me that would just be a lot more significant. I think Fergus was something like the youngest treasurer of a bus at 13 or something back in the day. Is that right?
Yeah, aye, absolutely. And it's no surprise to anybody who was in and around that Croy Celtic Supporters Club that he went on to achieve what he did as a businessman, because apparently he was switched on from a very, very young age. He used to run the place at 13. Run the finances and everything,
That must be why the chapel's so good looking, with the old plates going around putting in doubles. So it must have maybe helped the old father up there too. So you never know. But I think important to give a shout out to the Billy McNeill Commemoration Committee. As I said, that they've been on before. If you've not listened to it, check it out. And if you are in the area of Bells Hill, go and have a look at it. It's magnificent. And I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. I don't think any Celtic fan who was there in the day of his family were too. So a nice fitting tribute to Celtic's greatest ever captain, who will definitely never be forgotten. So we'll move on to January departures. So I think, Brian, we'll come to you first in this. But there's been so much chat around Josip Juranovic. People jumping right to conclusions the other night when Canada went 1-0 up against Croatia. That'll be his value halved. Of course, they went on to win the game 4-1. He was up against the top player in Alphonso Davies on that left-hand side. But Croatia got the job done. He's the one who everybody's been chatting about. But a person who I think would have been interested in this conversation would have been Cameron Carter-Vickers had he played for the USA. I think if you're at a World Cup and you're on that platform, people are going to look at you. And Aaron Moy on Saturday, it was some performance too for him. I don't think you're going to get a big money move for him, but there's some Celtic players certainly giving a decent account of themselves at this level.
Absolutely. And I think even at the start of the season in the summer, Juranovic was linked to, I think, Chelsea and Man United at one point. So you knew it probably wasn't long for the Celtic ranks, to be honest. And I think we've spoken about it before on the podcast, and I think where Ange is going to get it right is capitalising when there's a big money offering. And I think that's the right way to go about it. I think if we get 20 million, which I think should be a minimum for a player that's played at the World Cup at his age, and we go for 3 at 17 million profit is insane. I mean, that's absolutely excellent. And you know what Ange could do with even half of that money. We saw it. So I think that, guys like that are, and the age is it as well, probably like, I think he's 27 now. So you'd imagine whatever his next big move is, it's probably his last big move, really. So you think it's probably the right time to move on. Gutted to see him go, absolutely love him. And I know he's not officially away yet, but all signs are that he's going to space away. Alistair coming in, who has the worst poker face in the world. I saw the thing on Twitter when he was interviewed and he was just rubbish at it. And I've got somebody because I'd be like that as well, and I couldn't keep it in, too excited. So you're right. I don't think Moyes going to go anywhere. Again, age, profile, his family's in Glasgow. I think he's quite happy there. Delighted Carter Vickers didn't play, if I'm honest, because he's one of the bedrocks where, and I'm going to slightly contradict myself because I've said there's no many players that I don't think Ange can be trusted to replace, but there's certain players like Carter Vickers, McGregor, who I think are a real hard find, and they're so unique that I think they could get replaced, but that would be a real that would make me nervous. Whereas Juranovic, for all he's good, I trust the judgment that the Canadian guy coming in is going to do well. So I think it's good business if he goes, if I'm honest, especially the fact that we're getting the Canadian international in, who has looked great. I've not watched much of the World Cup, but I saw like everybody else, I've been a YouTube scout when you were linked with him. So that's been good. I've just got one quick point going back to what you were saying about the charity single, the Axon charity single. Paul knows what I'm going to say. So we've got some very talented people at Axon, as we know. So Paul sent the charity single around to the team for everybody to have a wee listen. So I was like, that's brilliant stuff, right? Now, the lead singer, I thought was Paul because the accent sounds quite like him. So I messaged Paul and Paul, what a voice you've got, fella. That's absolutely brilliant. Paul didn't tell me otherwise. So I've been telling people, well, you need to listen to the single. Like, Paul's some talent, by the way, you need to hear him. And he only broke it to me the other day, so...
I just let it run for a wee while, Brian. I mean, I let it run for a wee while. Listen, anybody who was kicking around in my era when I was kind of like 17, 18 wanted to be in a band. So we did all that kind of stuff. And I can guarantee you, I cannot hold a tune. So when somebody says to me, oh, you're some singer, Paul, listen, I'm taking that. Even though it only lasted a couple of weeks.
And you managed to keep it running for a wee while longer. So, I mean, it did the trick.
Absolutely.
It did the trick. But, Paul, with Juranovic, I think the flip side of this is Celtic's business to get people tied down in long-term contracts. And right away, the curveball back into the mix around him was, he's contracted to Celtic till I think 2026. I think he'd signed a 5-year deal. So even though what Brian says is absolutely bang on, that at 27 you're probably looking and thinking this will be possibly his maybe last or stepping stone big money move, he's still a Celtic player for a long time, and that's been something that I'm glad Celtic have got their act together with as these long-term deals, because you look at other clubs who have got 12, 14 players out of contract. It was us before Ange came in. You don't want that situation repeating yourself. You need to learn those lessons, and it's important that we've got guys like Juranovic and others down in these long-term contracts.
I just think, Declan, it's a lot easier to analyse what we were doing before versus obviously how it's changed, because we were very, very critical, particularly in that final season where it all went wrong. We were very critical about the way we were doing business. And actually, I think it's sometimes difficult to be critical when things are apparently going well and you're winning league after league, treble after treble. Because I remember back in 2017, Kevin Graham was like the prophet of doom, and he would come in and say there's loads of things not right at the club, and he would get dogs abuse for that. So it is difficult to stand up and say, actually, there's things we can do a lot better. But what we have done since, obviously, the old guard have moved on is we've completely changed our approach to recruitment. Like you say, we've got a guy there in Juranovic that, well, I'm now quite comfortable. I don't think I was at the beginning of the season, because Amy and I did a Monday bulletin, and I was saying this is going to be the first season, we've not sold a big asset, and we were trying to say, well, it's the first season we've not sold an asset, and it's the first season in 5 that we're going to be hearing the Champions League music, and there's a correlation between that. But now, sitting here, moving into January transfer window, I'm comfortable enough with the fact that if Juranovic goes and, like Brian says, we'll get the right fee for him because we've got him on that long-term contract, Declan, and we've already got the boy lined up. It's a complete turnaround to what we were doing before. I just think we became complacent. We knew that if we threw enough targets at a board, a couple of them would hit treble 20. I think that's what it was. And it worked. It worked before.
Yeah, I think that the difference is now that we're being active rather than reactive. We're getting the business done before anybody leaves the club. It gives you that bedding in period that you maybe didn't get before. You're not rushing about, on a deadline day to really bring in somebody that's going to be a first team player. I know we brought Oliver Abelgard in late during the summer window, but he's not really been a first team player for us at all. So we're not in that situation anymore. We were last year, but I hate to think what would have happened had we not brought Cameron Carter-Vickers in on deadline day last year. I really hate to think what would have happened there, but it's completely changed. And to bring Paul in the comments in, he says, the difference is our players don't want to leave like they used to. There's something special happening at Celtic at the moment, and the likes of CCV and Jota want to be part of it. Brian, do you think that's just down to that goal of you win the league, you're in the Champions League, and that's just where players want to be? That the pathway's there to play at that top level when you don't need to worry about going through these qualifiers anymore if you win the league title?
I think it's a factor. I actually think that the sort of if you look at sort of football landscape now, players that are developing, and this is where I think the SPFL teams get it wrong, right? Celtic aside, if you look at developing players and selling them, you have to sell them in a style that's going to fit them into most richer clubs. So they've got to be playing really good football, really fast football. They've got to be very athletic, and these are things that we do really well with our players. So if you look at Jota, he's coming to play in a team that is playing very exciting, very attractive football. Every good player, especially flair ones, want to play a part in that. If you're younger guys like an O'Reilly, like an Abada, they're getting all the skills they're going to need to fit straight into a richer league in a different club, because they're playing that one touch, they're playing fast. And even in Europe, they're not sitting back, retaining behind the ball and hoping, and then they go to, say, a club in England and they can't quite keep up with the pace, they've not got the athleticism. They're getting all that here. So if you're a young player, and it's not about Celtic necessarily being a stepping stone, but if you're a younger player and you're coming to an environment where clearly there's a good culture at the club, because you can tell the players get on with each other. Ange is very careful with signing people, as he says, no players, so you can tell there's like a good group of lads at that club. Mm-hmm. So you get into your work every day, you're playing with people you like, you're playing the type of football you like, you're getting the lessons that are going to hold you in great stead the rest of your career, and you can do that in Europe as well. That's an incredibly attractive proposition for any young player. Not just the fact you're getting to do it at a club like Celtic with that fan base and that level of support. I mean, you're iconic if you're doing well. They're all massive, massive factors that make Celtic really attractive. And don't get me wrong, there might not be. I think there'll be players like McGregor, Forrest, Ralston, even Taylor that I think will be at Celtic long term. But there'll always be that influx and outflux of players that's going to happen. And I think that I saw somebody in the comments earlier saying that it's a shame that we have to be selling players. I don't think we do necessarily have to. I think it's really clever business. Like a Juranovic, you could keep him till his contract runs out. But if you get that much more money, sell him and keep improving the squad, keep reinvesting in scouting, keep reinvesting in infrastructure. As a business, it's a great business model. It is. And as I've said before, I don't think, I said in the podcast before when I first joined Axon that our transfer policy was like, the Argos catalogue. We're just flicking through and going, he looks all right, he looks all right, he looks all right, and signing players. And it was like the Asda orders where you get a couple of subs because you can get the ones you liked. So you took that one instead, and we're hoping for the best. We're signing 20 players and hoping two were good. But we're actually doing the same transfer policy. We're just doing it the best version of it. We're still signing these young guys that nobody's really heard of. We're signing them cheap. But we're signing the type of people we like and the type of players that can fit a system. So that immediately going to be benefiting the club. And so we're seeing the best version of that. And I think it's the way we have to be moving forward.
Yeah, just that point, I think, Paul, staying one step ahead of the game, which Brian says, that, a guy like Juranovic, who have said, I think, is contracted to 2026, be fair to win by that point in time. But we've saw what happens with guys like Ryan Christie, Olivier and Cham, who we could have received significant fees for, go out the door for pittance, especially Ryan Christie being one of those guys. Guys like Ayer and Edward, who wanted to leave the club too. You don't want to create that situation. And I think, as Brian says, it's a good system as long as you use it to your advantage. It's just something I've just not been doing. I think back to Kieran Tierney going out the door for 25 million quid, and we bought two players in, and it was two players who, Volleyball and Goalie had played Europa League football, but it wasn't tried and tested. He played a lot of wing back. He wasn't coming in to initially do that for Celtic. Taylor, who had watched at Kilmarnock at the time, we knew he was half decent, but was he going to slot right in and be a first team pick right away? I don't think so at that point in time. So it's about having that system where in the January you go out, you buy a O'Reilly, Maeda and Hatate, and they just slot right into your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I pitched something yesterday, Declan, right? And I would be interested to hear your thoughts, because I don't rate Ryan Porteous. And I said this yesterday. I don't rate him, right? I've never rated him. I've been vocal about it on here, and people disagree with that. A lot more people agree with me. But when you put that out as a debate, people think automatically, oh, you're saying that because you want Celtic to sign him. I don't. What I was trying to get at, and the discussion I had with Liam delved into this, is that as well as the transfer strategy that we have, I think there's also a situation where Ange Postecoglou is looking at, right, where's my next 3 or 4 guys coming through the academy system? And he's looking at a team that's playing in the 5th year of Scottish football, and I don't think he reckons that enough of them are ready to step up. And there has to be a quota of homegrown players. 4 of them, I think, can come through your own academy, 4 from other academies. And so you've got 8 guys in a Champions League squad that we'll be announcing, obviously, next season. And there may be, I'm not saying there will be, but there may be a thought process whereby we're looking at some of the guys that are leaving Scottish football for pretty minimal fees when you look at some of them. And again, I'm not saying we should have signed Lewis Ferguson or we should have signed Josh Dog, you know who I mean, Josh Doig. But these guys have moved on, and Aaron Hickey being another one who we tried to sign. They've moved on, and already Hickey has got a massive move to Brentford. There's talk that Doig's on the move in January, and also already talk that Juventus might even be interested in Ferguson. And I think we're looking at the Scottish market, because why not? Because it's an option. So why would we say, right, we can tap into all these various markets, which we've done so well, and ignore the Scottish market? I don't think we can do that. And that's why I said, the latest in a line of young players coming through that's caught the eye of quite a lot of teams is Ryan Porteous. Will Celtic be interested? The vast majority of Celtic fans said we shouldn't go near him. But if Welsh leaves in January, and there's a chance he might, then is he an upgrade? Is he no better than Welsh? And that was the debate, and I think it's a debate we need to have, because the Scottish market has to be considered as well.
Yeah, you should always look for players domestically that can add something. I think Greg Taylor's a good example of that. You see players that have went out on loan in the league, like I know Tony Ralston's not the best example of it. It didn't really thrive at St Johnstone or Dundee United, but it's always a market you should consider. I think probably previous we were looking at as a market of players that were first team ready, which is probably the wrong thing to do. Maybe 2-3 years ago, you're maybe looking at somebody of Porteous' profile and thinking, we'll take him and we'll fire him right into the starting 11. I don't think that's what we should be doing at all. There's a couple of decent players, I think, about Petrodi that look okay. I think Connor Barron's one of them. I think he's a decent player. Porteous, for me, I wouldn't touch him, but I always think that you should consider the Scottish market. Just due to that Champions League squad, as you say, Paul, it's important to do that. And, I think this kind of nicely brings into the mix a guy like Johnny Kenny, who I take it we're talking about here. We've brought over now. He's not Scottish born. He's playing down for Queen's Park in the Championship. A good Queen's Park side just now, Brian. I think this is a debate I've had before on here with Lawrence, Natasha, Patrick. What is your take on Celtic keeping players within their ranks in the B team for Tottenham's sake? I know Kenny's one of those who are a wee bit above the age, or letting them go and thrive out at a Championship side. I know Luke O'Connell went to Queen's Park, did well. He's obviously no longer a Celtic player. But is that what we should be looking more to do with some of these guys, do you think?
So I've got a kind of, I suppose, a sort of different view on it. I think practically it would be better if they're playing at a higher level, right? So you'd assume that going to a Championship club or going to somewhere in England would be a better move. However, because Ange plays such a certain system and he's training such a way, I don't see the point of players going like, so, for example, Scales going to Aberdeen. He's playing every week. He's been playing well, right? I still don't think he's going to have a place at Celtic. If we've got a youth player coming through, I think it's better for them under Ange if they're playing and training his way at Celtic, where he can see them every day. Because if they go to, say, like a Kilmarnock or something like that, they're not going to be playing the way Celtic play.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they come back to Celtic, they need to change and adapt into that anyway, instead of being retrained for the start. And I don't think it especially helps them. That being said, I think when a player's getting to about 19, maybe 20, if they're not playing anywhere near the first team, they should just go. Because I don't see them breaking out at that stage. And I think that when you look at the fact we're signing the guy Kobayashi, 22, left centre back, it probably means Welsh is away. And if you look at the replacement, Austin Law's been kind of there or thereabouts. There's no reason to send anybody else if he's there. If you do send somebody else, then just let him go. The academy system's not been working for a long time. And a lot of people have been, I don't know, critical Ange, but saying, oh, we should get more players on. But the players aren't there. The players aren't there that are good enough to come in and do a job. Mm-hmm. There's no point in putting them on. I think your academy system is going to get better. I think playing, as I say, training with the first team, training with the first team and playing that style will help them longer term, especially the guys at 15, 16, 17, 18. But guys 21, 22, 23, if they're not playing now, they're not going to play. So Kenny, it'll be interesting to see. I think he's still pretty young. I actually think he done pretty well in pre-season. He's very fast. I think he would fit into the system fairly well. So you might see him. But the academy system is going to take a long while to fix. It's not going to be, I don't think, it might be another 3-4 years before you see, academy guys coming through into the first team. But I think longer term that will be the plan. So you go to the academy first, then maybe look at Scotland, then maybe look at other leagues, and then see where you end up. In regards to Porteous, I wouldn't sign Porteous either. Again, I think he's probably past that point of, I think he's like 23 now, I think, as well. I think Welsh is probably a better player, and Welsh isn't going to be the answer moving forward by the looks of it. I'm a wee bit disappointed actually if Welsh goes, because I do like him. I think he's a wee bit underrated, but it is what it is. And I think I've said before, Ange is, as much as he's Ange and we love him, he's ruthless. And if you think there's a better player there, or you're not quite at the level, you're off. And I think what we may be in for in the summer is, someone who we think is unsellable getting sold. Maybe that be like a Kyogo or a Hatate or Yakimakis. Some of these players, I think, if he thinks there's someone who can do a better job, I think he'll sell them no problem. I think he sees the club as far bigger and far more important than individual players. And until the academy system is up to a point where they can walk straight in on thereabouts, I don't think you see it.
And that talks about the evolution that he continually bangs on about. It's why Harry Cole comes in. Stephen McManus did a good job as a first team coach.
And that's not going to happen overnight, right?
No, of course not.
That's why it takes years before you see it.
But I think, in terms of like guys like, Abad is another example of a young player coming in, to me, that what kind of signal that sense saying the guys in the B team just do is, we can go out and buy somebody who's first team ready to bring into the squad development and be better than what we've probably already got in our ranks, which is a real shame that that's the case just now. But we're taking guys like Abada and Kobayashi. O'Reilly's another one, he's only 22, who are around about that age, but you're kind of talking about Brian, who's maybe sent off to a Queen's Park or a Kilmarnock. And of course, there's a flip side of it. Callum McGregor didn't make his way into the Celtic first team till late, after going down to Notts County and whatever else. You don't want to say just get them out the door for the sake of it. I think it's interesting that we've sent Mikey Johnson out to a team who, are at the top end of the Portuguese league. I think, that ties in with what you were saying earlier, that if you're maybe thinking about a potential future for them, Liam Scales going to Aberdeen and defending a lot, compared to having a lot of time in the ball that he'd maybe have ourselves, isn't going to be the right fit, and then you're basically needing to retrain him. But it's interesting because we've seen players like Ayer go to Kilmarnock, come back in, do the job, be ready-made, fine. There's some in the B team like Rocco Vata who I would like to see possibly get that chance in, but as you say, I don't think it's a quick fix for us at all.
Look at Ralston. You mentioned Ralston and as an example earlier. He didn't impress anybody really when he was at St Johnstone and Dundee United. And in theory, that's the right move, sending him to the same standard of league. And then look at the difference in him training the way Celtic do, under Ange's coaching. He looks like a different player. And actually, another reason why I don't think people are too upset about Juranovic potentially going is because Ralston's really good. I think Ralston's probably been better than Juranovic this season, if I'm honest. I think Juranovic's a better player, but I think Ralston's been better. So, and that's kind of where I'm thinking. Like, if Ange can coach Ralston to that level, and he can coach the younger guys to that level, is it worth sending them, to Derek McInnes for a year? Are they going to get coached the same way? I don't see it. So that's where I'm I maybe see it slightly differently. And I think that's maybe what the strategy is. Whether it works or not, we'll find out in due course.
I think the ideal scenario would be, and I think that the only reason why we've got a B team in the pyramid is because Celtic will want them in the highest level of that pyramid as possible eventually. And there's been loads of kind of roadblocks in the way that getting them in the league was a roadblock. And that's why they're in the fifth tier. Eventually, I think Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, these teams will want their Colts teams to get promoted. They want that to be introduced eventually so that they are playing at championship level, no higher. Unless, obviously, Hearts get relegated or something. They can't play in the same league as the parent club. So until such times that happens, because there's no way, I'm sorry, no disrespect to the league, there's no way you can pluck somebody out of tier 5 and put them in your first team. So it's not going to work until such times as the B teams in the championship. But in the meantime, why not look at kind of nursery clubs? A lot of the big clubs do it. And basically what will happen is loan deals on an annual basis. 3 or 4 of them go to the same club. And within that club, there is an understanding of the philosophy and the style of the first team at Celtic. And you just got to look at players that are in our team that have come through the ranks. Some of the big clubs who are brilliant at nurturing talent, who have nursery clubs, who then sell their talent on and make huge profits on them, are Ajax and Partizan Belgrade. And they two teams are looking at you having played 100 first-team games by the age of 21. Now, how many players have we had that in the last 10, 20 years? I think Tierney might have done it. James Forrest, I think he was about 22 by the time he hit the 100 mark. As you said, Declan, Carl McGregor makes his debut at 21 for Celtic. So we're miles away. We're miles away from what is seen as a European standard. But I think everything we're doing, even though it's going to take a while, like getting the Colts team in the league, is with a view to having almost our own nursery club in the league. And if you're playing in the championship, the step up's going to be much, I'm not going to say easier, but five divisions, it's too many. The other thing I was going to say about Luke O'Connell and Johnny Kenny, first one with Luke O'Connell, I think there's no doubt in his ability, but his pace wasn't there, so he was never going to come back to Celtic. And Kenny, what I would be wanting, even though he's 19, I'd be wanting him to make an impact, and he's not making an impact at championship level. So to think that he's going to come back to Celtic and make an impact, I think it's not going to happen.
No, I don't see him as of yet, being anywhere near that level. I think it's important that you give guys that opportunity to train and play. Obviously, the few of them went over to Oz with the first team and whatnot. But for me, a team like Queen's Park's a kind of ideal place that you could maybe be looking at. There's obviously close ties there between individuals who are at Celtic and at Queen's Park, and it would be the worst place to be looking at. Glasgow-based clubs who are on the rise just now and are playing good football in the Championship. Certainly be a place I'd be looking at to try and do. But I think added into the mix, Paul, that the UEFA Youth League, I think it's been really, really important. I know somebody had said that in the comments there. I think that also lets some of these guys have a taste of what they're really up against when you're playing against elite young players. Your guys from Madrid and Leipzig, particularly this season, and they got a result over in Germany. So I think that's also an important factor in this for some of the young players are getting that chance to play at that level. But again, it's not consistent enough. You're going to get 6 games at that, and that'll be it.
Yeah, the big thing for me as well, with regards to the European League, I do think back to the team that I seen, and we were playing Sporting Lisbon. They were playing the games no far from yourself, Declan, at Firhill at the time. Was that not that generational thing that Mark Warburton came up with? I think he was involved in it before he got a managerial job.
Might have been you.
And when you look at that team, it was the lack of those players that actually came through at Celtic. I think Darnell Fisher came through. By the way, an absolute standout that night. He came through. But, it goes back decades. We've just never nurtured it. And every so often you'll get a Kieran Tierney or an Aidan McGeady or maybe a Sean Maloney who comes through, you sell him on, and then it washes away the last 10 years of never doing that with a player. You know what I mean? It's almost like, right, we've justified the academy for another 10 years because we've made a profit on a homegrown player. And I don't think that's good enough.
No.
See, the thing is as well, like, it's, if you look at it from, the club's perspective, unless, because you're right, Paul, about finding that influx of talent and their kind of special talents, right? But say, because in the comments, you see it every day, some people want us to spend 40 million every year on players. Some people say, bring the youth players through. And that's wildly different reactions. It's always that question, would you take 3 years of playing youth players and no having success to then have long-term success? Or need instant success, in which case you're always buying players and there's no point having an academy? Now, that's two extremes, and then getting that right is probably the hardest thing in football, especially at a club like Celtic, to get these players to come through but always be winning. Like, I think you spoke before, and there's been a couple of times, say, like Vata, for example, who's been on the bench. You think, right, we're 3-0 up against St Johnstone at home. Why not give them 15 minutes at the end? Right? That would be something that you start to feed players through into. But then the flip side of that is, I think him and Abada are the same age. Is he better than Abada? Obviously not. So, did he deserve to play, or are we just playing him because he's one of the youngsters that's nearly there? So it's a hard balancing act, as I say. I think historically, the criticism of the academy and the way things have been done is absolutely right, because it's not been done well for, I don't know how many years, really. But under Ange, he's only been here 2 years. It's going to take, we need to have that sort of almost business continuity and sort of run that through, and then they may start filtering in. I think, let's say Ben Doak, for example, I think he'd have played a decent part this season if he'd have stayed. I think Ange fancied him and he put him in a few times. And I think that's a damning indictment of the players up there, because Ange has shown he will play players if he thinks they're good enough. The fact they're not playing, it probably shows you their future.
Yep, that's been something in the comments that somebody's picked up on. Marty here saying that we've had 4 or 5 huge prospects in the last 2-3 years, and already up at City, Liverpool and Bayern. That's a huge problem. Obviously, Heald, I think another one to add into that mix, can do to Leeds United.
I was just going to throw in there, talking about Heald, right? We were doing at the award ceremony 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Declan, and Emma Jones joined us at the table. Now, obviously, Emma works for Leeds United TV, and it was the busiest table of the night. That's all I'm going to say, with people coming to get selfies and all that kind of stuff. And all I wanted to talk about,
I never knew you were that popular, Paul.
Right. Certainly wasn't with me. But the only thing I was interested in speaking to her about was Leo Heald. So she must have thought I was a proper anorak, which indeed I am.
Yeah,
I didn't even get a selfie.
Nah, well, did you request one, or did she request one? See, this is where the balance is to be with these things,
I would never. I don't think I've ever taken a selfie. I don't think.
But kind of moving away from Celtic's youth system and kind of scouting the global reach on it. I know this was something that I'd mentioned to you earlier on, Paul. I'm quite excited with the markets that we're still looking at and exploring. Brian, I'll come to you in this one first. We've went to MLS before, and we signed Andrew Gutman and Manny Perez, who just disappeared off the face of the earth. I think Andrew Gutman actually plays for Atalanta United, who are the club that Dave Cormack owns at Aberdeen. I think he's out playing there. It's been a league that we've explored before. Obviously, both those guys never made an impact. Kobayashi, we've went back to the J League to bring a player from there in. It really excites me that there's still untapped markets that we're going in the direction of, and the fact we're now in the North America market with Alistair Johnson is also really interesting.
Absolutely, and it's again, it kind of goes back to my earlier sort of rant, and that guys like Gutman and stuff we signed, they were decent players, but there was no sort of will they fit in the system, are the right type of people, will they fit into the culture, how does their play match your style? There was no consideration for that. It was just they let a good player and he's young, sign him. Whereas now, I think it's a lot more calculating, and we can see these markets and say, right, he's got the attributes, not just as a footballer, but as a person. They fit our system and our sort of type. I think with the North American, what you get with that is you get a real winner's mentality in these players. It's just American culture. They're so big on, pro athletes. They're massive on it, and they're super fit. They really want to work hard. They want to improve, and they're ambitious. And I think these are really good metrics for to bring players in. As I say, I think you look at these markets we're potentially going into, and it's just clever business. Like, I think I was talking about it on Friday maybe, and we were talking about like Champions League money and stuff, and I said I'd rather invest that into scouting and putting guys into these different leagues in these different countries and seeing what's there, because there's just a world of talent. Like, look at the boy Shakhtar Mudryk. He's going to be an absolute superstar. We could have put, 2 years ago, we could have spotted that potential and got him for about £1 million. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's players there that if you're quick enough, you can find them. So I think scouting is really important, and I think that it almost doesn't matter what league it is. So the American League, people sign guys for America, sign guys for Japan, blah blah blah. But it's the individual, and I think the faith we can have now is if I'm signing these guys, if Ange's first signing would have been this boy for Canada, people would have went, Celtic doing it cheap again, this is rubbish. Mm-hmm. Look at it now. Now we're going, Ange knows this guy, he's done well at the World Cup. Do you see what I mean? It's such a different way of doing it, and it's credit in the bank for the big fella, because his transfer record, maybe James McCarthy and Gucci aside, it's been absolutely exceptional.
Yeah, without a doubt. There's one thing that comes to my mind, Declan, is Andy Lynch obviously spent a lot of time with Andy, and he was speaking about, obviously he was part of the NASL, but the team that he was a player manager for was the Montreal Manique. So at that time he lived in Canada, hence the reason why Simon Lynch was born there. And he was talking to me about the good, the bad and ugly of the NASL, and the one big thing he always said was they didn't, there it is, there's the book right there, Hoop Stars and Stripes, nice plug. And he said that what they didn't do right is they didn't have that infrastructure in place whereby they were producing their own players. They didn't have the academies, and actually they weren't really interested in doing it back then. And as we all know, that they were all about just buying the best players from world football, and that's why George Best, Johan Cruyff, Pele, they all went over to play in the NASL.
Don't forget
Bobby and Jinky. Jinky went over for a spell. But interesting enough, that came to my mind when we started getting in, this kind of interest in and link to Alistair Johnston, because he obviously plays for Montreal. And I was just thinking back to what Andy says, but it's taken a whole generation for them to get that right. And now, when we're interested in players from these markets, we shouldn't be surprised, because I'll tell you what, the gap between when Andy was there in the 1980s and where we are now has absolutely shortened. If you were to take an 18-year-old from Montreal and compare him to an 18-year-old from Glasgow, what's the difference these days? But 40 years ago, there was a huge difference.
Yeah, and, I was reading something the other day, and it said out with the top 5 leagues in European football, the most amount of players that's went to this World Cup are from the MLS, which talks volumes about, the calibre of player there. And I think that breeds in well to what we're after. We want players coming in with that bit of experience, that they can play at the top level, play against good sides. And, Brian, when you're looking at Johnson, 33 caps or something here, Craig, someone in the comments, they say at 24 years old, that's impressive. And he believes that Canada are a good team. He's playing alongside someone in Alphonso Davies, who's a superstar. We know his qualities. He's younger than Johnston. But, Davies is a superstar at Bayern Munich. These are the type of players that you should be trying to get. And again, I was talking to a Canadian journalist yesterday who's basically said that Johnson fits the Celtic profile perfectly. If he's got 15 minutes with the press, he'll sit with them for an hour. He's approachable, he's a really nice guy, and whatever else. So everything about this move just seems to be perfect for us.
Well, exactly, and that's what I'm saying earlier. We're doing these things right now, because these profiles fit us exactly. It's not just a player we're happy to sign. What I mentioned, we were talking about Alistair Johnson on Friday. The fact he's 24, I felt was a wee bit unusual, just because I felt like we should probably start. That's the only. It's not a negative, but it's the only thing I think we need to improve on is maybe signing guys a wee bit younger and getting them so that, as Paul said, they've played 100 games by the time they're 21, 22. In fact, he's got 33 caps for Canada. He's a ready-made replacement for Janovic, you would suggest. Competition for Ralston, I think, is a really good buy. But again, it's no. And again, it does come down to Ange, no matter what way you slice it, because there's a reason he's signing specifically these guys. It's because they fit the system. They're, affordable, and they seem like good people. And that's the difference to previous years. And as you say, the fact that guys playing at a World Cup against good opponents and playing alongside great players can only be the benefit Celtic longer term.
One other wee thing, a wee link back to Billy McNeil at Bells Hill, Declan, the copper who was meant to be looking after all the police was Lex Bailey, and at the last minute that was changed, but Lex Bailey's based there apparently, and it brings to mind that, back in the day when he was at Celtic, I know the record books say that he signed for Toronto Blizzard, but what actually happened was Billy McNeil had played with Tony Taylor. McNeil was a young player coming through. Tony Taylor was one of the more senior players who actually left for Crystal Palace, and he was coaching over in Canada, and they did a deal to get Lex Bailey over there to get game time. So there was a guy who couldn't get a game for Celtic, but he went over to Toronto Blizzard and starred because they didn't have that youth setup where they could bring in a centre half of their own. But it's gone full circle now, and actually, if we don't watch what we're doing at Celtic, and we need, we could be left behind when it comes to youth talent, because there's absolutely no coincidence that we haven't been able to bring the players through for that period, and we've lost all those players that the commenter mentioned earlier, because there's a whole team of them. I think you could throw even Dembele into that mix. He didn't get enough game time, he's away, he's playing football in France, so I think we'll come to rue that in years to come.
And it's about spotting that talent earlier. Donny's come in here in the comments to say he liked Buchanan for Canada, pretty direct and not fear to take on a player. Tajon Buchanan's at Bruges just now, who at this point in time have got a much better track record of bringing youth players through, and has been tipped for a £20 million move elsewhere. So even if that's important at the point you get in here. And it's also quite interesting, Bang, you're talking about getting in at the right time, the age of the player that Hatate's almost similar to Johnson, and they've both came through their university systems in their respective countries. They've still got that wee bit of development to go, but they're both first team ready players for us. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's where it differs slightly with some of the leagues, I suppose, as you say, the university system and things like that. Because Hatate's only been professional for 2 years or something. Is that right?
Yep, 2 years. Yep.
So that's insane. So I suppose you have to caveat that when you're dealing at the age of these players coming in. But again, it just shows that you mentioned Club Bruges, so they're in a position where they've been bringing through youth and they're relying on that sort of thing. They're making loads of money off it, which then means they can get maybe a couple of marquee players and stuff. And I think that's what Celtic have been trying to do for a long time, but it's not been quite working. And I feel like over the next 5 to 10 years, as long as Celtic have modernised appropriately and are going to keep that continuity and that sort of system in place, like post Ange, then there's no reason we shouldn't be able to do that. And then I know a lot of people say get players ready so they can go straight into the Champions League, but then if you're bringing youth players through, they can play the Champions League. Surely that's the goal, because then it becomes sustainable, a la like an Ajax, like a Spartak, like a Club Bruges, like whoever. So I think that's a long-term game, and I think that's what Ange would rather do. I think that seems to be. I think he's sort of said that before. I think that's the plan. But again, it's just going to take a while to get there. But we're on the right track.
Yeah, I think we are. And
we are on the right track.
You look at the kind of the bigger picture of it all. It's almost as if just now this season in the Champions League, players within our side were kind of taking those scalps first Champions League level to get used to it, get that experience of it, and then we're all hoping progress next season. Whereas if you're looking at internationals who are playing at a World Cup or whatever coming in at your side, played CONCACAF, it's another tournament that I think will prepare you pretty well for Scottish football. You're bringing in guys that can just assimilate absolutely perfectly, that they won't be inexperienced at playing a top level or up against quality opposition. So it's one I think that I'm excited about, and also Paul, to kind of bring Sead Haksabanovic into this conversation that Johnson's got as he's versatile, which Haksabanovic is too. That we're bringing in players that are not just, a right winger and that's it. Haksabanovic, can play either side of the wing, can play as the number 10. Alistair Johnson can feature as the right side of a back three, can play right wing back, and he's also played the other side. So I think that's important in terms of your overall squad going forward.
Totally. You look at some of the signings, the adaptability of Matt O'Reilly when Callum McGregor gets injured. Jota and Maeda being able to switch wings. Abada can switch wings. All three of them can play through the middle. Apparently Hatate can play left back. So you start asking yourself, is this something that Ange wants? He wants them to have two or three rather than just having this fixed position, because I was taken by surprise, maybe I shouldn't have been with Matt O'Reilly's performances since Callum McGregor has been out of the side as well. I'm just wondering, Deck, if you want to have a wee chat about Morton, because there are a couple of wee links to Morton, Celtic links, and obviously we've just drawn them in the Scottish Cup.
Yeah, Bill, after Ayr Pollock last night, which I think one of our Axom contributors, Jim Orr, had headed down to. So we've been drawn against Morton. Obviously, the immediate link there is Effie Ambrose, who's been a standout since joining them. So he'll be returning back to Celtic Park.
He's found his level.
Well, maybe you never know. I used to quite
Brian,
like
what age do you think Effie is? I was looking at this morning.
I think he's younger than I think he is. I think he's maybe only 32, 33.
He's 32, because I was surprised at that.
He was younger than I thought.
Yeah, I thought he was a
He's
lot
like a
older.
45-year-old right enough. But
32 years of age, Big Effie still doing that front flip. And when I had a wee look at him, obviously, since he left Celtic, he's played for quite a few Scottish clubs, isn't he?
Yeah, Livingston was the one I remember most obvious.
The Pars, he played with the Pars, St Johnstone and now Morton. But you know what happens, right? You draw Morton and instantly I think, right, remember when we drew them in the Cup back in 2013, and it was the League Cup third round and they beat us 1-0 after extra time. Dougie Emery scored the goal. I'm going to read you the Celtic starting lineup, guys, just so that you can go away from this bulletin safe in the knowledge that we're in much better shape. Here we go. Zaluska, Ambrose, Van Dijk, Mulgrew and Lustig. Beaton, Brown, Borigter, McGeoch, Rogic and Pookie. And Morton pumped us after extra time. There's one for the wee guy on Twitter that's doing the Neil Lennon facts. The manager was Neil Lennon that day. Yeah, nice one.
I remember that game well because it was a cold night, and again these cup ties early on are always not very well attended, so there's more seats around you and whatever else, and it makes you feel even colder. And it was a cold night. And do you say that was 2013, Paul?
9 years ago, mate.
Yeah, so I would have school the next morning, so the 40 extra time wasn't something that I think
I had a
too
shift.
chuffed about.
I had a shift to go to the next morning. But also the other thing I was going to say is, just before we came on, Declan, I seen a story there breaking that apparently Morton are interested in giving Lee Griffiths a lifeline.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously he's been training with Livingston, hasn't he? McGee, another one who's been training there. He's went down south to, I think, Forest Green Rovers. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting one because Morton are charting the door to obviously try and get into the Premiership this season. That they've had a really good start to the season. For teams to win leagues, you want players who scored goals. We know that Griffiths can do that on his past form. Whether he's still got it just now, I think was yet to be seen. But it's an interesting one because I think from Morton's perspective, it's either win or bust with that kind of signing. They'll either come in, hit the ground running, and score goals for you, or he'll cause more problems than he's probably worth.
They tried it with Gary O'Connor, remember, when Shields was in charge. I mean, again, just having a wee look at this before coming on, obviously, he's the same age as Effie Ambrose, by the way, Brian, 32. And since leaving Celtic, he's played for Dundee, Falkirk and Mandurah City. Last game he played for Celtic was on the 24th of July 2021. Seems like a lot longer ago than that, 2021. And I'll tell you what, in the 18 months since then, his career has nosedived. He's been in free fall. So, who knows? Wish him all the best if he does get a contract.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it, how quickly it can change for players. And I think it's one of the things sometimes as fans we don't consider. A lot of times I remember when Kieran Tierney left, and some people still hate Kieran Tierney for leaving Celtic. And it's like, you need to remember, as a short career for these guys, and it can turn very, very quickly. You know, it can go wrong, a couple of injuries, and that's it. So these guys need to maximise it. And yeah, I think sometimes we don't really consider the sort of, I think, darker side of football's the right phrase, maybe it's a bit dramatic, but how quickly things can change. But as I say, look, I'm happy for anybody that's going to put their life the right way and doing well. So if the guy gets a good move and back to form, good for him.
Paul, just to wrap it up, did you have a couple of things in a kind of half-term report, just kind of short?
I did.
Questions to us?
Yeah, it's a half-term kind of report looking at successes and otherwise. So I was just going to ask you guys, if we were to look at the signings, and I always underline the fact that the first three were loans to permanent in Maeda, Carter Vickers and Jota. On top of that, we've also had Siegrist, Bernabe, Moy, Haksabanovic, and a couple of loanees in Jens and Abelgard. If you were to pick one, I'll start with yourself, Brian. Who's been the success so far of the first half of this season from that list?
Haksabanovic, maybe. Just because I think he's added a little bit something different to the front. Or Jens, I say Jens was probably one of the best signings this summer, just because of his bit more stability at the back. So him or the Action Manovic.
Most people are saying Haksabanovic. Declan, do you agree with that?
I think always try and put into context the importance of Cameron Carter-Vickers, which you seen how big a player he was missing to our side when he took that injury. You know, going into the Champions League with Stephen Welsh and Moritz Jens as your centre half pair wasn't the best of situations, I think, for us to be in at that point. Obviously with Callum dropping out the team, Cam's taking over the armband. I know there was that video of the huddle and maybe he's not a shouter or whatever else, but I think he lets his football do the talking on the park, and I just think he's a real rock solid player to us. So for me, if it's just based on, you know, who signed permanent, I'm going to say Cameron Carter-Vickers, but I think I'd agree with Brian in terms of potential and what we're going to see to come in the next part of the season. Say Haksabanovic for me.
There's 10 players out on loan, guys. Barkas, Scales, Montgomery, Soro, Uragide, Wiley, Kenny, Ayeti, Shaw and Mikey Johnson. A couple of the guys have been spoken about today. If one of them's going to come back and be a success at Celtic, Brian, which player is it going to be?
Well, it's Barkas, 100%.
He's doing all right.
Man of the matches at Utrecht.
There's still going to be hologram hands. He's never coming back. But actually, I don't think any of them are coming back. Don't need to be a wee stickler in the mud, but I don't see any of them coming back making a huge impact. Maybe Montgomery is the one that I thought. I was a wee bit surprised when he left. I thought he could really flourish under Ange, but if I'm realistic, I don't think any of them are coming back.
What about yourself, Dick?
I'm going to go with the two that's featured most under Ange. Probably Adam Montgomery more than Michael Johnson, but I've been impressed with Johnson's work attitude and effort going out there to Portugal. They're in a good position. I think they're 4th or 5th in the league table just now out there. And he's certainly putting in the performances for that. He's making an impact in a team who are playing attacking football that certainly fits our bill. But Adam Montgomery, but I thought was a decent player when he came in under Ange. Probably used a bit more than the manager would have liked him to be. So, yeah, possibly Adam Montgomery and Michael Johnson. I think if you're looking at age, this is going to be the time. If Michael Johnson is going to come back, he needs to make an impact when he comes back.
Yeah,
Adam Montgomery's probably still at that point where maybe another loan deal could benefit him. But I'll stick with Adam Montgomery.
Nice. I would say the same. Before we get on to Ange's performance, I'm just going to say another Canadian Celtic link has come to mind of recent times. I know that there were other ones back in the day, but can any of you guys remember Jacob Lenski, who was at Celtic? And he was from Vancouver. We eventually let him go in 2007. He signed for Feyenoord. He eventually played against us in Europe for Utrecht.
Is this the goalkeeper?
He was a midfielder.
Okay.
And I remember him doing an interview. And he basically, his attitude was unbelievable. You know, he was talking about, when you look at him now, he's 33 years of age. He's one of these players, Declan, who probably played 50 odd games in his entire football career and just chucked it. He was really, really highly rated and just didn't have the attitude. And he used to complain about having to wash boots and stuff when he was at Celtic. Nice one, Jacob. Hopefully he's doing well. But the final thing I was going to ask you is if we're going to give Ange a grade, because it's a half-term report card, Brian, if you're going to give him a grade, Ange, we're 9 points ahead. We're in the semi-final with the League Cup. Yes, we got knocked out of the Champions League, but we've seen off a manager of our nearest challengers already. How would you grade it, ATF?
Oh, so domestically, an A. In Europe, C-. Just, which seems harsh because I think the performance was very, very good, but I have to offset that against the actual results. So C- in Europe. So, but with a wee caveat that I'm going to be a bit harsh, but an A domestically.
Nice. What about yourself, Dick?
Yeah, I think domestically, pretty much perfect apart from that St Mirren game. It's been a long run of league wins, something that we knew we had to do last season. It's just kind of continued on. I think possibly that St Mirren game, he thought that the squad was in a place that it maybe just quite wasn't. I think if he'd have made those changes now, he'd have seen a much better team. I wanted to throw in Aaron Moy has got the second joint most possession won back in that group, just below Christian Eriksen. So it pretty much says something about his World Cup campaign so far. I think I'd agree with Brian, in Europe, frustration, probably more than disappointment, just how many chances and whatever we created. A-, B+, somewhere about that. I think, domestically, top notch. To be 9 points clear going into this break was excellent. I think we'll come back a different animal after the break, but I think, next season we really want to see us make inroads in European football, which is something he'll want to do. So I don't think the big man would give himself an A, so I'll go with a B+.
There you go. DJ Choice goes for a B domestically and a D in Europe. Just before you wrap up, Dick, I'm going to do a shameless plug, because when I was on the show yesterday, there was a delivery. Look at that. 7 years it's taken to arrive. There you go. That's the new book, The Celtic Jersey. And in there are match-worn examples of every single Celtic jersey since 1936, right up to this season, barring three that I could not find. For love nor money, and there it is. That's the latest book coming from the stable of A Celtic State of Mind from myself.
So a good Christmas present if you haven't already sorted out one of your nearest and dearest. And I don't know, have we hit 20k yet on YouTube, Paul?
We are 43 away, Declan. 43 subscribers away on YouTube. So if you're watching this and you haven't clicked on subscribe, we're going to make it as easy as possible. So now all you get on the channel is Celtic content. That's it. We're setting up a separate channel where all the other stuff's going to go onto, so that if you don't like notifications about a band or a filmmaker or whatever it might be, it'll be on a separate channel. Subscribe to Axom and all you'll get is Celtic content. And also, you'll be thrown in a prize draw for 2 tickets to go and see the Wim Jansen Tribute Night at the Armadillo in May as well. So yeah, please subscribe. That helps us a lot.
Yep. And if while you're down there, give the video a wee like too. Gents, you're welcome anytime on a Tuesday. If the other troops don't turn up, it's been good to pass the last hour with you, and as always, thanks to all the usual contributors in the comments. So thank you for watching.